Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next 30 minutes, we'll see what's making the headlines with the former Conservative Special Advisor, Henry Newman, and political correspondent at Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Guardian reports that Labour will unveil plans for digital NHS passports tomorrow. The Telegraph reports concerns that the Chancellor's planned changes to inheritance tax will not add extra cash to the Treasury. The Times says the government is planning to double council house building after it receives a budget boost next week. A former Defence Minister has told the Eye that the UK would struggle to protect itself from a missile attack. The Metro says 9 million people have been victims of a finance scam this year alone. The Mail highlights a new study claiming that hundreds of thousands of people could die from exposure to asbestos in Britain's schools. The Mirror leads with King Charles honouring Pride of Britain winners ahead of the award's 25th anniversary. The Express claims that 84% of pensioners will lose out on winter fuel payment cuts. The Star's warning its readers to watch out for beetles eating away their Christmas trees this year. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by the former Conservative Special Advisor, Henry Newman, and political correspondent at Politics Joe, Ava Santina. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Guardian front page and this concept of NHS passports for all patients. Wes Streeting unveiling plans for portable medical records, giving every NHS patient their details at hand, but some concerns over privacy, Henry.
I think this sort of confirms that Wes Streeting is one of the government's most proactive ministers. I think he's somebody who's actually seems to at least have a diagnosis of the problems in the health service, maybe not a perfect diagnosis. I'm not sure he's yet got the answers, but he's somebody who's clearly trying to hit the ground running. And obviously the government's been hit by a variety of different scandals and buffeted by turbulence in Number 10, the departure of Sue Gray. But I think Wes Streeting is saying, look, I've got a plan, I'm trying to do things, what he's trying to say. I think passport's perhaps the wrong word. I mean, the whole thing about the NHS is that anyone can use it. Any British national has right to use it free at the point of care. But it's about data, and it's about making sure that your records can be available wherever you're being treated. I don't think it's a totally new thing. I think the last Labour government actually talked about a big NHS computerisation scheme. That went quite wrong in the end, and they ended up writing off a lot of money. So the idea has been around for a long time. I think it is a good thing to get the patient records in a better state, and we've got the NHS app that we all got much more used to using during COVID with our immunisation records and so on. But there will be controversy. People will be obviously worried about privacy, they'll be worried about scammers, and they'll be worried about data being sold off for research and so on.
But Wes Streeting saying that the data would be protected and it would be anonymised information, so people needn't worry.
Well, I mean, you've said that he's the most proactive minister. You could also argue he's the most Blairite minister. He is really a minister who has been schooled by the Blairite project. And, of course, they did try to introduce ID cards at one point, and there was some talk of that just before the election. So you can imagine that there may be some alarm bells ringing from people who are concerned about how their data is used and shared, particularly because the NHS has not been modernised for such a long time. I mean, if you speak to a doctor who works on any ward up and down the country, they'll tell you that a lot of the time they're actually fighting over one computer that's about 20 years old. And so, you know, that kind of computer that's possibly using Windows 97, I'm not sure how comfortable I would be with that holding all of my data. And there's also this conversation about relaying your information over to private healthcare companies so that they can advance certain healthcare. I mean, that sounds fantastic in principle, but how can you be sure that the NHS is in a fit state to provide the sort of technology that really can keep it anonymised? The NHS has been hit before by a scamming attack. Who's to say it won't be hit again?
That is the worry, but the suggestion in sharing information with private providers is that those who, not just those who can afford to pay, would have access to treatment.
And he's had controversy elsewhere. He's, I think, been defending his plan to give fat jabs to those who are unemployed, and that's obviously caused a bit of controversy. I think claimed he was not planning a dystopian future for the UK, which I'm sure he would say that. But I think he is you could call him Blairite. He's somebody who clearly wants to hit the ground running and is trying to get stuff done. And I think it's undeniable that whichever party was in power now, they'd be wanting to look at the NHS. We spend an enormous amount of our national income on this, and it clearly isn't delivering the outcomes that everyone would want it to be delivering.
This is also, there was a story yesterday in the Sunday papers where they were talking about where Streeting was announcing these potentially smartwatches that a lot of people would be able to wear, so that then the onus would be on the patient. Actually, you know, some of these health outcomes could be more
more about preventative rather than waiting for the instance to occur. Let's move to the Times inside page 6 and 7, and this story about councils sitting on billions meant for homes and roads. How so, Henry?
Yes, so I actually worked in the department which was responsible for looking after local government. It's my last job in government, and it is a real challenge. Everyone wants to see more infrastructure built. People want generally to see more housing, even if it's not in their own backyard. They want to see new roads delivered. But actually getting this done is very challenging. And that's why I think it was a huge mistake of Rachel Reeves to come into office and talk on the one hand about increasing investment, but at the same time, some of her very first acts as Chancellor were to cancel a load of road schemes and rail schemes, to put a question mark over some of the hospital upgrades. I think that was a mistake. And I think it's interesting that senior figures, both Conservative and Labour, have been saying, hold on, that's a really bad idea. These capital projects, these big investments, take a really long time to get going. And if you pause them or call them into question, it just makes it worse. And I think what this story is drilling into is the difficulty that local government has in actually getting money out the door. And I think the details of the article also draw out that part of the problem is because the budgets are very carefully ring-fenced into different pots, and you can't swap the money between them in the way that you could potentially with your household finances. And that makes it very hard to actually, if one bit gets hit by an unexpected delay, a bit of extra inflation in the cost prices, it all has a terrible knock-on. And that's, I think, part of the problem. And overall, as a country, we just need to be building stuff faster and more cheaply.
To the ordinary layperson listening to this, it sounds incredulous that the councils are having the difficulty spending the money. The research saying that more than 200 local authorities found that on average they had £19 million in unspent funds given to them by developers to pay for local infrastructure improvements.
But also, you know, I mean, as you've said, you know, that within councils, certain budgets are ring-fenced, but they have been struggling over the past few years, mainly because there hasn't been any social housing to put people in, and that's meant that they've actually had to absorb huge hotel costs for people. So there are people up and down the country who are living in hotels and have been living in hotels for a good couple of years, and that's taking up an extraordinary percentage of the council's budgets. I mean, I believe it is known, but I will be happily be corrected. It's around 60% of their budget is going purely on temporary accommodation. But you know,
not so much. But I think you're right, though, that it's huge pressure.
Newham specifically.
Oh, Newham, sorry. But I think you're right. There's huge pressure, and I think it's exactly as you're saying. It just sometimes seems mad. Why can't you spend this money faster? And part of the problem is that we have all these checks and controls in place for the public sector. It's a good thing because we don't want to see public money, taxpayers' money wasted, but it also means it's just very difficult to actually get it all out the door, and there's a huge amount of bureaucracy and control. It is frustrating, but I think it gets to the core of a much bigger... It seems like a technical problem, but it gets to the core of a really big question, like why don't we have enough houses? Why don't we have enough new roads?
Let's move to the Telegraph, Henry. Take us into this story regarding inheritance tax and the plans that Rachel Reeves may or may not have for
so
it.
the Telegraph, no surprise, is against changing inheritance tax. And I think the bigger point it's making, really, is that a lot of her planned tax raids actually look like they might backfire. So before the election, she sort of made a big deal of saying that she wouldn't touch the three main rates of tax: national insurance, income tax and VAT. She's now fudged that a bit on national insurance and is suggesting that she will touch that. But we don't know what she's planning to do around inheritance tax. It's a relatively small money raiser overall. It raises about £6 billion. It's not, in the scheme of things, that much money. It's not paid by that many people, but it's hugely unpopular. And I think the Telegraph is suggesting, at least, that there's a danger that if she goes after this, actually you'll just increase the number of ways that people seek to avoid paying this tax, and it won't actually get her the extra revenue that she so badly says she needs.
Yeah, economists saying that it's unlikely to raise additional revenues and hardly seems worth it.
Well, she's going after this agricultural property relief, and that could, you know, if successful, that could raise around £400 million for the Treasury. But then you've got farmers on the other side of that who desperately need to pass on their land because it's a family business and they're not, you know, squirreling away money. They actually, this is their bread and butter. So what she wants to do is raise the 7 years between someone passing on land until they die, that it's tax-free, and she wants to raise that to 10 years, which means that there's an extra 3 years in which the taxman is able to raid you for your tax. But again, as you said, you know, in total, economists are saying that all of this could raise around £1 billion, which is, I'm sorry, but it's sort of chicken feed, really, in terms of where we are with the Treasury. And that's only if it's completely successful.
This next story is shocking. Daily Mail front page. Hundreds of thousands of people will die from exposure to asbestos in Britain's schools. This is according to a new report that's out. And the Mail is launching a campaign to strip buildings, hospitals, schools of asbestos.
I mean, I think it's a great campaign to be running. There clearly is a problem with bits of our physical infrastructure, our homes as well, and we've seen more and more research recently about the dangers of living in substandard accommodation, substandard homes. There was obviously the tragic case of a boy, Awab Ishak, who died from black mould in his house. And I think that the Mail is taking this in a different direction now with a campaign about improving the physical structure of our schools, and I think that's broadly a good thing. I think asbestos deaths have come down in recent years, but it's still a total of about 5,000 across all different sorts of asbestos-related illnesses. That's an extraordinary number, and I think if we can find a way to reduce these figures, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I was just going to say the figures that they're giving since 1980, at least 1,400 teachers and support staff and 12,600 pupils have died from mesothelioma, an aggressive cancer caused by, you know, inhaling the asbestos fibres.
We actually did a double take at that, didn't we, outside?
Yeah.
I mean, 12,000 pupils, that seems astonishing. And also, what I can't quite understand, we're in the shadow of the rack scandal, of the crumbling concrete scandal. It is sort of rather interesting that when constructing schools and certain infrastructure, that you looked at concrete that wouldn't crumble, or you looked at, you know, fibres that weren't asbestos, and you thought, no, we won't put that in the schools. That's absolutely fine. We'll just put it where the children go. It seems incredible.
I think it was obviously they were built a long time ago, and people didn't think about the dangers or didn't know about the dangers.
Yeah,
but I think the challenge again is it comes back to that question: where are we going to find the money to pay for new schools, and how are we going to get them built quickly enough so that without, you know, all those problems of delivering big infrastructure?
Henry and Ava, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Metro. Online con epidemic revealed with 9 million people being scammed. Do stay with us for more.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his 3rd term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over 50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up, and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Maitai village on the front line.
Firing to civilians and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, we have former Conservative Special Advisor Henry Newman and political correspondent at Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. Let's have a look at this story in the Metro, front page of the Metro. 9 million amounts have been scammed. This is a huge figure. People that have been roped into schemes, scammers posing as a friend in need, fake debt advice, pension or investment scams. That is a huge number of people that have been scammed, isn't it?
I mean, it's sort of, I think it's, at one level it's totally extraordinary, another level perhaps it's not. I think we all sort of know people who've fallen victim to a sort of online scam or a kind of a phone scam or something else. I think it's not a completely new thing, but it does seem to have been getting so much worse. And I think one of the terrible things is often they're related to some sort of offshore element of criminality, a gang that's based overseas, but the people who are scammed, many cases might be elderly, not always, but they can be, perhaps not so much with online scams, but then if they are scammed, they end up feeling completely stupid and like you feel like you've been sort of outwitted by a criminal. But the reason these scams are so successful is because they're very good at doing it. And we look at these numbers are just appalling. And I think clearly there's a basic problem in the policing that they're not able to go after these scams in the right way. And there is a question about whether they got the right resources to tackle serious organised criminality that's driving this.
And a lot of these are, perhaps smaller, petty crimes. So perhaps you might purchase something on a social media site like Instagram or TikTok, and then the product is never delivered to you because it's not a real company. And, a lot of this is down to regulation and tech. We just simply, UK legislation has not caught up with how fast I sound ridiculous. I sound so old, don't I? With how fast the internet is moving. But yeah, so the internet is really outpacing our legislation. And if you look at some of these scams now, they are extraordinarily advanced. I mean, I get texts from, companies pretending to be Royal Mail, and they say, we've got a package for you. And I go, well, it's quite possible you do have a package of mine. And
Exactly.
Before I know it, I'm on the link and I'm out £5,000. Not really.
Oh. Thankfully, that wasn't real, but it's very, very easy to do, isn't it?
It is
It's very easy to do. Our final story is in the Eye, and this is another worrying story. The UK has a significant defence capability gap that means it would struggle to protect itself from a missile attack. This from a former defence minister. I don't know who exactly, because we've only got the front page, but worrying nonetheless.
I mean, it is, and I think it speaks to a kind of a bigger problem that's happening now. Clearly, there's huge political pressure to increase defence spending and improve the quality of our military, and that's being tested very aggressively by Russia. And I think people also looked at what's been happening in the Middle East and the success of Israel's Iron Dome and also related systems that have been able to shoot down ballistic missiles and other projectiles, and thinking, well, hold on a second, do we not need that here in the UK? That will obviously be very controversial, but I think there will be, whatever, in any circumstance, there's going to be real pressure to increase defence spending. It's something the last government was talking about. I don't think this government's been that clear on it, although Keir Starmer has been sort of lecturing other countries about the need for them to increase their defence spending. I think some people may turn around, and we may well have a President Trump in the White House, he would be saying to Britain, come on, increase your spending.
During the election, Labour were sort of almost dancing around whether they were going to increase defence spending, and I do believe that Keir Starmer did confirm during one of the election debates that he would increase it, so we'll see that in the coming months. But a lot of it, I do remember actually the story first arising back in May, and it was from a provider to the RAF who first raised this idea that perhaps we do need an Iron Dome in Britain, and it did seem a bit of a, well, an opportunity for business perhaps for that provider. But, you know, this is all off the back of actually quite a worrying story that RAF Typhoons were unable to shoot down ballistic missiles fired from Iran into Israel. So the question is now, do we have the tech capacity? Are we spending enough, and does everything need an upgrade?
The minister concerned, the former minister concerned, was Tobias Ellwood. But we have heard this warning many times in the past, haven't we, that we're not prepared, not fit for purpose.
Doesn't mean it's wrong, and I think that's the risk here. And I think Keir Starmer has said he will increase defence spending. I don't think he said by when, and that I think we'll know in 10 days' time. Rachel Reeves' overall plans for the economy, but I think I'll be very interested to hear whether she says clearly from the dispatch box in Parliament when she's going to get to a proper plan to improve defence spending and how quickly that will happen.
OK, Henry and Ava, thank you very much. We'll see you in the next hour. Much more coming up on Sky News at 11. The Health Secretary hints a deal has been done for more money for the NHS in the budget.
Of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.